struggling to get ahead. My brothers and sisters, I don't know if you had the time or took the opportunity to watch it, but our president took a moment as a part of his presidential duties this past week to address the House of Representatives and the nation in the annual State of the Union address. In that address, he talked about the progress that was made, progress that the government has made, and the progress that the nation is making, how the economy is beginning to turn around, the number of people who are benefiting from the Affordable Care Act, and the other great progress that's being made in our country. And at the same time saying, despite the progress that is being made, we yet have a ways to go. That despite the progress that's being made, that women are still getting paid 77 cents for every dollar that a man is making with the same qualifications working the same job. That despite the progress that's being made, that we still have veterans who have served our nation, who have come home and don't have access to the physical and mental health care that they need in order to survive and re-enter into society. Despite the progress that is being made, there are still people who are working and who can work 40 hours or more a week and still not have enough money to live in our society. Despite the progress that's being made, there are still people who are struggling, trying to get ahead, trying to make ends meet. Sometimes their hope isn't even that their ends meet. Their hope is that their ends can look at each other from across the street and wave to each other every once in a while. As a nation, as people, we still have a vast number of people in this country, not to mention the more impoverished countries in the world where running water and electricity are a luxury. There are so many people who are struggling, trying to get ahead. And it seems at times, my brothers and sisters, that every step we take forward, that we're knocked a step or two back. It seems at times that no matter how hard we work, how dedicated we push, that at times it seems that there are forces against us that are keeping us from making the progress that we ought to be making. It seems that there are forces at play that are conspiring for our failure and not for our success, my brothers and sisters. And if you've ever been in this place, or you find yourself in this place, then you may relate to where our disciples are throughout the heart of this text, as they are out on the water. To really understand the significance of what's happening, let me take a step back and set the picture of where the disciples have left. Jesus is just concluding one of his greatest revival services ever, where the people have been gathered together. 5,000 people have come out to hear Jesus preach. And actually, that's just 5,000 men. That isn't even counting the women and the children. And so Jesus has a massive crowd who have gathered from multiple cities out in the wilderness to hear him preach. And you know that Jesus is out in the wilderness because the people in the cities don't want Jesus around because they know that the message that Jesus is preaching is a threat to Rome. And because it's a threat to Rome, it means it's also a threat to them. So Jesus is unwelcome in the cities to preach, but he goes out into the wilderness, and the ministry that he has been engaging in is so impactful that 5,000 people leave their homes and leave their daily responsibilities to come and hear Jesus preach this sermon. And the scripture says that Jesus had been preaching so long that the people began to get hungry. And the disciples came to Jesus and feed all of these people. And even if we could, it would take more than a year's wages to be able to feed all of these people. Jesus, you gotta let the people go. And Jesus said, what do you have among you? And they counted what they had, and they had just a few fish and a few loaves of bread. And Jesus said, bring them to me. And they bring Jesus the food, and he begins to break the food. And as he breaks it, he multiplies it, and he passes it out to the people, my brothers and sisters. And in an act that Jesus foreshadows the Last Supper, he engages in the same set of activities that he does with the Lord's Supper. He takes the food, he blesses it, he breaks it, he gives it to the disciples, and they pass it out to the people. Now, the interesting thing is that Jesus is not only engaging in an act of feeding the people, but Jesus is also engaging in a very type of political statement, because everybody would have recognized that government had two responsibilities. There were two responsibilities that government had. The first responsibility was to protect the people, to make sure that the people are safe, that if you are part of this land or this empire, this nation, that the government's responsibility is to make sure that all of its citizens, and not only its citizens, but all of the people under its care are safe from outside threat or outside danger. Now, it is no guarantee that you're going to be safe from inside danger, but at least the government ought to protect you from outside danger. The second thing, my brothers and sisters, was government was to make sure that the economy was strong enough that everybody had food to eat, to make sure that everybody at least had their basic needs taken care of. And that's why, my brothers and sisters, some of the most egregious times in history, the times of revolt against government, have been times when people have been hungry. In France, when people were hungry in France and they were rioting, and Queen Marie Antoinette, they came to her and they said, the people are hungry, they need bread to eat. And she was so distant from the needs of the people and cared so little about the needs of the people, they said, well, if they don't have bread, let them eat cake. As if the people could afford cake if they couldn't afford bread. My brothers and sisters, and that's why France revolted against Marie Antoinette, and she ended up losing her head because the people would not stand by as people were hungry while the queen was eating and feasting on foods from the land, my brothers and sisters. It happened even in the United States, that particularly after World War I, when people came back from World War I, when veterans came back and they could not find work and they did not have jobs, and there were these veterans that were hungry and had no way to be able to get food, and they camped out in Washington, D.C. They camped out in these villages in the nation's capital in order to protest their conditions. It was the beginning of passing acts such as the GI Bill and other acts that made it possible for us to have a middle class, which seems ironic that the same people and the children of the same people who benefited from the GI Bill, which was the government doing what the government was supposed to do, making sure that the needs of the people were taken care of, but yet those who have benefited from those bills and other bills that made it possible for people who could not afford homes to buy homes, now that they've gotten established in their middle class-ishness, now they want to turn their nose down on others and say the government shouldn't be helping other people, that they ought to get up and go to work and do it themselves, as if they've forgotten that they weren't always in that situation, that the government had to help them or help their father or mother to get out of their poverty, to get to where they are. How soon we forget where we've come from, my brothers and sisters, which is why it's important as we are entering into Black History Month that we take time to reflect and remember where we've come from so that we don't lose our way as we're trying to move forward. So Jesus has engaged in this very political act, feeding the people, doing for the people what Caesar would not do for the people, inserting himself and saying that this is what true leadership looks like. Without saying a word, he challenges the authority of Caesar, and Jesus, in the midst of this great revival moment, tells his disciples, up with you. So the disciples, leaving this euphoric moment, have gotten onto the sea and are traveling to the other side. And after Jesus dismisses the crowd, Jesus goes up to the mountain to pray. Now, this isn't a part of the message, but I can't go through this without stopping to point out the fact that even Jesus needed time to himself to pray. And so if Jesus needs to take time for himself in order to pray, my brothers and sisters, then you and I definitely need to take time every once in a while to turn off the TV, turn off the radio, close down the computer, turn off the cell phone, go somewhere by ourselves and take a moment to pray so that we can reconnect with God and recharge and let God's Spirit speak to us and let us know where it is that we are and where it is that we need to go. Every once in a while, we need to take a moment to get by ourselves and go in our prayer closet and have a little talk with Jesus. Jesus goes to the mountain to pray. After Jesus prays, he comes down to the beach and is by himself as the disciples are on the sea, and he sees the disciples, and the scripture says that the disciples are struggling. They are rowing against the wind, trying to get across to the other side, and they're having difficulty making it. They have left one side, are on their way to the other, in the middle of the sea, and the wind is against them. Now, the interesting thing is that wind isn't always a bad thing on the sea. There are times when wind is actually very helpful when it's blowing in the direction that you want to go. When the wind is blowing in the direction that you want to go, then you can actually raise a sail to catch the wind to help propel the boat. And if the wind is strong enough, you can actually take the boat all the way across. But if the wind is blowing in the other direction, not only do you have to take down the sail, but you have to actually row against the wind. You have to exert more energy than it would take normally to get across, because the wind is preventing you from making progress. And so here are the disciples in the middle of the night, in the middle of the ocean, where it's dark, trying to get to the other side. The wind is blowing them, and because the wind is blowing, not only would it be stopping them, but you know how wind is, it doesn't exactly come at you from one direction. But if you've ever been out when the wind is blowing, it seems like you turn around trying to get away from it, it still finds you, and you turn the other way trying to get away from it, and it still finds you, because the wind doesn't come at you linearly. It seems to come at you from all angles. And so as they are rowing, the wind is not only just preventing them from moving forward, but the wind would be working the boat from all angles, turning the boat this way and that, so it would be easy for them to lose their course. So in addition to them trying to strain against the wind to get to the other side, they've got to work hard to keep the boat on track so that they don't end up somewhere where they're not trying to go. What I'm simply trying to say is what seems like it should be an easy exercise of leaving one side of the land to go to the other side of the land against the wind becomes increasingly difficult, because the wind is blowing them every which way. And I don't know about you, and I don't know about your experience, but if I'm going to be honest and testify, I can tell you that there have been times in my life where I've been trying to do not great and amazing things, but seemingly little tasks, just trying to do the simple task of making it day to day, and it seems like all of the forces around me are blowing against me and blowing this way and that, so it's hard to simply do the little things it takes just to get from day to day or week to week. It seems like sometimes that heaven and hell and all the world are conspiring against me to throw me off track. And I'm like, Lord, what in the world is going on? All I'm trying to do is just make it. I'm just trying to be a good Christian. I'm just trying to grow a little bit. And it seems like everything is conspiring against me. Have anybody here ever felt like that? Am I pitching in the right place today? Have you ever been in a time where it seems like all the world around you is conspiring against you? Well, my brothers and sisters, have you ever been in that moment, or if you are in that moment now, or if you find yourself in that moment in the future, there are three things from this text that I want to lift up to help you
going on. The disciples never get so far that they are outside of the sight of Jesus. My brothers and sisters, and what I want to say is that no matter where you are, and no matter how difficult things be, no matter how crazy life gets, no matter how many forces it seems are conspiring against you, you are never so far that God can't see you. That no matter where you are, no matter what's happening, God has his eye on you, my brothers and sisters. In fact, Job knows this experience when Job was going through the midst of his storm, when his life had been torn apart, and his friends were blaming him for his own condition, and even his wife said, "You need to curse God and die." That in the midst of it, Job says, "I don't know what's going on. I don't have any explanations for this. I can't explain what's happening. I don't even know where God is in the midst of this. It's so dark, and the sea is so dark that, and the wind is blowing against me. I don't even know where I am, but I know that God knows where I am, and that God is seeing me through this. And when I get to the other side, I'm going to come out as pure gold." My brothers and sisters, and Job's testimony is the same testimony that we can have when it seems like life is conspiring against us, that no matter where we are and no matter what's happening, God has his eye on you. God sees where you are. You're not too far to be outside of the sight of God. My brothers and sisters, I want you to turn to your neighbor and help me preach this and tell your neighbor, God's got his eye on you. My brothers and sisters, and the reason that it's important to know and remember that God's got his eye on us is that sometimes when we're in those stormy situations, it feels like we're all alone. Sometimes when we're in those stormy situations, it feels like God has abandoned us. But I want you to remember, even when you can't feel God's presence, all you've got to do is look up and say, "God, I can't see you, but I know you can see me, because I know you got your eye on me." If you remember the movie Ray, towards the end of the movie, Ray Charles is having flashbacks to his childhood. He remembers the conversation he had with his mother, where his mother is saying, "Ray, you're going blind, and there's nothing we can do about that. So you're going to have to learn how to take care of yourself, because I'm not going to always be here to take care of you. So you're going to have to learn how to trust your ears." And shortly after that, Ray has a moment where he comes running into the house, and he trips and he falls on the floor. And his mother is standing right there. But she knows that if she reaches out to help him, he'll never figure out how to do this on his own. And so Ray is there lying on the floor crying out, "Mama, Mama, I need you." And she's standing in the corner trying to hold in her emotions as she watches her son. But after a moment of crying, Ray begins to pull himself together. And he starts listening to his surroundings. And he hears the horse and buggy outside that lets him know where the front door is. And he hears the tea kettle in the kitchen that lets him know where the kitchen is. And then he begins to hear a cricket as it makes its way across the floor. And his hearing is so good that he's able to follow the cricket to its place. And grabs the cricket in his hands and put it to his ear. And then as his mother is amazed at his ability to figure his way around, he says, "I can hear you too, Mama. You're standing right there." My brothers and sisters, what I'm simply trying to say is that sometimes when we are down and out, it seems like God is nowhere around, but God is always right there watching over us. And if we can just take a moment to gather ourselves together, to take a moment to center ourselves, we'll realize that God is always right there watching over us, my brothers and sisters. God was there watching sea and begins to walk to the other side. And the Bible says that Jesus was going to pass them by. And I've been wrestling with this. Why on earth would Jesus pass them by? Jesus sees that the disciples are struggling out there against the wind and the waves. Jesus sees that they're having difficulty trying to make it from one side to the other, and yet Jesus is going to get out on the water to pass them by. And now the interesting thing is that the Bible does not tell us why Jesus was going to pass them by. We can try to make inferences or assumptions, but let it be known that whatever inferences or assumptions we make are simply that. There are inferences or assumptions. There's nothing in the text that tells us why Jesus was going to pass them by. But I have my own theory, and understand that this is my theory. This is not gospel truth. This is just the way I see the text. The way I see it, my brothers and sisters, is that Jesus is in the process of leadership development with the disciples. Jesus knows in his mind that he's not going to be there with them always. And Jesus, just like Ray's mom, needs the disciples, just like Ray, to figure this out for themselves and needs them to be able to get the strength in order to make it, my brothers and sisters. And so Jesus is walking by to the other side because Jesus knows that the disciples already have all that they need in order to get to the other side. What I'm simply trying to say, my brothers and sisters, is that sometimes when you're in the midst of the storm and you're in the midst of these circumstances and it seems like everything is conspiring against you and you're wondering, why isn't God opening a door? Why isn't God making this easier? Why isn't God doing something for you right now? It is because God knows you have the strength to deal with what's going on around you, my brothers and sisters. That the reason that God is sitting by and watching is because God knows you already have what it takes to make it. Which is why, my brothers and sisters, every once in a while, in the midst of the storm, I know it seems counterintuitive. I know it seems not to make any sense. But what you ought to do in the midst of the storm is just take a moment and thank God that in the midst of the storm, you have not lost your mind. In the midst of the storm, you are still together. In the midst of the storm, you are still putting one foot in front of the other, because it is a sign and a symbol and a recognition that you're strong enough to make it. Won't you help me preach this by turning to your neighbor and tell your neighbor you're strong enough to make it? Tell them like you believe it. Tell them you're say, neighbor, you're strong enough to make it. I know the winds seem fierce, but you're strong enough to make it. I know the waves seem mighty, but you're strong enough to make it. I know the circumstances seem difficult, but you're strong enough to make it. I know the trouble seems like it's multiplying, but you're strong enough to make it. My brothers and sisters, the trials in life may come, difficulties may come, the dark nights and the long days may come, but the reason, my brothers and sisters, that you are in it is because you are strong enough to make it through no matter what the devil and all the demons of hell have planned. My brothers and sisters, you are strong enough that you can make it. The last thing, my brothers and sisters, the Bible says when the disciples saw Jesus, they became afraid and they cried out because they thought Jesus was a ghost. And we've talked about what fear does. How fear overrides our ability to think. Fear overrides our ability to really process what's going on. Fear is a powerful emotion. It's hard at times to control it. It triggers this little almond-shaped thing that's in the middle of your brain. It's called your amygdala. And then what happens after that is your immediate impulse is often a biological reaction that you really don't have control over. Fear has a way of causing us to shut down. And perfectly logical, intelligent people act foolish when fear comes in. Perfectly nice and reasonable people lose their minds when fear comes in. My brothers and sisters, the best of us can act like the worst of us when fear comes in. Because fear is so powerful, my brothers and sisters, which is why we have to learn how to control and master our fear. That doesn't mean that we will never be afraid, but it means that when we feel fear rising up within us, that we don't give in to the fear, but we recognize what's happening to us, and we begin to try to take strategies in order to prevent it. Sometimes it means that knowing that fear is so powerful that we don't always have the moment we need to react to it. Sometimes it means that we let others know, hey, look, when I act afraid, this is what I do. When I act afraid, I get angry for no reason. When I get afraid, I run and hide. When I get afraid, I want to ignore the situation. We let people know how we respond when we become afraid, so that when we're in the midst of that and that amygdala triggers and we start acting the way we normally act, there's somebody around us that has the ability and to whom we've given the authority to come and grab us by our arm and hold us and say, look, I know you're acting this way because you're afraid, but you don't have to be afraid because God is still with you even in the midst of that, my brothers and sisters. That sometimes we have to trust somebody enough to let them know so that they can help us navigate through the fear that comes in our lives, my brothers and sisters. What I'm trying to say is that we weren't meant to go through this life thing by ourselves. None of us is so strong or so great or so intelligent that we never face moments of fear. None of us is so impervious to the environment that we won't react to it, my brothers and sisters. And in those moments when we react, it's good to have somebody who's right there with you, who can pull you and shake you and bring you back to yourself. I was installed as pastor of this church back in 2010, and the Saturday before the Sunday I was to be installed, I decided I wanted to do something to commemorate the moment that kind of symbolized and honored what I was doing by coming to take this church and begin this journey as a pastor of the church. So on that Saturday, as a way of symbolizing the step I was taking coming to pastor the church, I decided I was going to jump out of an airplane. So I went up to Warren County Airport and spent about 5 hours learning how to act in the air, so that I would kill myself and everybody around me, and then how to land on the ground so I don't break a leg when I land. So I spent about 5 or 6 hours, and they were going through teaching me all the things that I needed to do. And then they make you practice it over and over again in different situations. And so I'm laying on the table in the middle of the room, practicing being in free fall and doing the things that they're telling me to do, and checking my height and checking where my parachute is supposed to be and all of those things. And they do it over and over again until it becomes second nature, until my muscles begin to act on their own without me having to do much thinking about it. And so after 5.5 hours of going through this, we get up in the plane and we begin to ascend into the air. Now, my brothers and sisters, let me tell you that no amount of preparation on the ground prepares you for the experience of going up in the air. And so as the plane begins to take off the ground, I've been on planes before, and planes really don't bother me, but this plane was a little different, because I didn't have any seats. I'm just sitting on the floor, and I'm not in my suit or traffic that reminds me that I'm about to jump out of this plane. And I realize that most of the time when I get in the plane, that I'm going to land in the plane. But now I'm remembering that even though I'm going up in the plane, I'm going to come down without the plane. And so I'm getting in there, and fear is beginning to rise up in me. But I start taking a deep breath, and I said, no, Nelson, you decided that you wanted to do this, so we're not going to panic and freak out now. And so I take a deep breath, and I begin to settle myself down. And then I begin to talk with my instructors as they're reminding me of everything that I've learned, and I'm spitting back to them everything that they've given me. And then my mind, I'm just thinking through the process. I'm not worrying about the fear, because I'm thinking through the process that's ahead of me. This is what you need to do. You know this is coming, and when this is coming, this is what you're supposed to do. So I'm telling myself, going through the process, deciding that I'm going to be the best at the process that I can possibly be. And so then we get up till it's about the right height, and they're waiting for the winds to settle down enough for me to be able to get out. Now, it would be one thing if all I had to do was just get to the door and jump out. But that's not all you have to do. You have to actually climb out on the wing of the plane while the plane is 11,000 feet in the air. And so here I am, it's 11,000 feet in the air, and I've got to climb out on the wing. Now, the good news is I don't have to climb out there by myself. The instructor climbs out ahead of me, and for no other reason to let me know that I can climb out there and still be safe. So my instructor is out on the wing, and he says, "Are you ready? If you're ready, come on out." And so I decide there's no reason for me to stand around and wait and think about this. I've come this far, let me get out here on the wing. And so here I am on the wing. My hand is on the top wing of the plane. My feet is on a little step that they put there just for your feet. And so I'm in a push-up position on the wing of a plane 11,000 feet in the air. And so my other instructor gets on my left side, standing in the door. And so I'm sitting here, I'm ready, and I'm like, all right, I know what I've got to do. And I look to the instructor on my right, and I say, check in. And he says, okay. And I turn to the instructor on my left, and I say, check out. And he says, okay. And so then I go and I push my weight down against the wing of the plane, and I push up against the wing of the plane, and I push down again on the wing of the plane, and then I let go. And in that moment, when I let go, every sense, every nerve in my body was trying to process what in the world was going on. My eyes, my ears, the nerve endings in my body, they're trying to figure out what is happening, because I've never been 11,000 feet in the air before. And so even though I was managing my fear, the moment I let go, I was unprepared for what was happening around me. And so, if you've ever seen The Matrix, and you've seen when they plug people into the Matrix, there's a moment where everything goes black as the world around them fades away, and the next, the world of the Matrix begins to come forward. I was in that black moment.
Wow.
I couldn't see anything, I couldn't hear anything, I couldn't think anything. I was not there. I don't know where I was, but I was not there. And so I'm in the air, 11,000 feet in the air, and now I'm falling. And I can't even get access to my brain to pull myself back together to do the things that I need to do. And so, but I did not jump by myself. My instructor on my right and my instructor on my left jumped with me. And they are looking at me and they're realizing that I'm not there yet. And so my instructor on my right grabs me and he shakes me. And when he shakes me, I feel my body shaking, and then I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I got to do something now. And then all of the training came back to me. And I remembered what I was supposed to do. And so I checked how high I was. And now I'm 9,000 feet in the air. And I say, we're 9,000 feet in the air. And he says, okay. And then I check to where my parachute is, so I know where I need to pull when it comes time to pull. And so I check it 3 times. And then I check my height again. And now we're 7,000 feet in the air. And he says, okay. And so we've got some time because I've done And then we get to 6,000 feet in the air, and I know time is coming for me to let these two gentlemen go. So I'm watching as we go from 6,000 to 5,900 to 5,800 to 5,700 to 5,600 to 5,500, and I give the sign to let them know I know it's time for me to pull my parachute. Then I pull the parachute, and they go on down, and I sail down to the ground, my brothers and sisters. Now, what I'm saying is, despite the fact that I was trained for the moment, despite the fact that I knew everything I needed to do, when I got there, I was still unable to access my brain because the experience was so overwhelming. And I am an intelligent guy. I know how to think. I know how to remember things. But all of my intelligence and all of my education could not prepare me for that moment. But I had an instructor on my right and an instructor on my left that had jumped out of planes hundreds of times before. And so they knew what I was going through. And so they knew that all they had to do was just shake me a little bit and I would snap out of it and come to. My brothers and sisters, what I'm simply trying to say is that in life, God is not designed for you to do this thing by yourself. Because no matter how good you are, or how smart you are, or how together you try to have it, there are going to be moments where the situation comes and you are going to lose your mind. You are going to be able to access your intelligence. You're not going to be able to dig up all of your training, and you need to have somebody on your right and somebody on your left to be able to shake you and say you know what to do. Don't act like you lost your mind. Don't let fear get the best of you. Now, my brothers and sisters, the good news of it is that even in those times when we are by ourselves and there's nobody around us to shake us, God doesn't leave us out there by ourselves. But the psalmist says that you have two coaches who are always traveling with you. One's name is grace and the other's name is mercy. And no matter where you go, grace and mercy are going before you to let you know that it's all right, and they're coming behind you to let you know that they've got your back. And so that even in those times, grace and mercy can just shake you every once in a while and remind you you've been through difficult situations before. You don't have to lose your mind on this one. You've been through difficult moments before. You don't have to lose yourself on this one. Every once in a while, my brothers and sisters, it's good to get a shake from grace and mercy so that we remember that there's still a God who sits high and that can look low. There's still a God who sees us in the midst of our condition. And if we can, my brothers and sisters, learn to trust in God, if we can, my brothers and sisters, get our bearings, if we can, my brothers and sisters, learn to reach up and say, Father, I stretch my hands to thee. No other help I know. If thou withdraw thyself from me, whither shall I go? If we can learn, my brothers and sisters, even in the midst of the difficult times, to turn back to God, then while we are struggling, we know that God is right there with us. And just like Jesus got back into the boat to help the disciples get to the other side, God will be right there with us, my brothers and sisters, to make sure that we get to the other side. Won't you help me one more time? Won't you turn to your neighbor and tell your neighbor you're going to make it? Tell them, like you would maybe even say, neighbor, you're going to make it. I know it seems difficult right now, but you're going to make it. I know it seems challenging right now, but you're going to make it. I know sometimes it feels like you're losing your mind right now, but you're going to make it. And when you get to the place where you feel like you're losing control, I'll be right there to shake you a little bit to help you remember that God is still God and God is going to see you through. I'll be there to shake you a little bit to remind you that you're not in this by yourself. I'll be there to shake you a little bit to let you know that the same God that got with you see